Could the Seattle Seahawks take away the next in line to be calling plays for the mighty Detroit Lions offense? What's going on, everybody? Good morning. Happy Sunday. Yes, I brought back Floating Head Brendan. For some reason, some people thought that because I got a physical green screen, I can't do Floating Head Brendan anymore, and actually it's easier than ever to do it. I just have to wear the right shirt. And yeah, we have ourselves Floating Head Brendan. Also, some of you may notice that I had more microphone problems. I've been playing with the settings, so if I sound a little different, that's why. Let me know how you guys feel about how it currently sounds down in the comments. I think I got it to a pretty good point, but ever since Blue Sherpa was taken away from me, I've had all kinds of issues with this, so I'm still not completely thrilled with it. Regardless, though, we're not here to talk about either of those things. We're here to talk about the Seattle Seahawks' next offensive coordinator, and we go into today, January the 19th, still not knowing who it is going to be. So, let's unpack another likely candidate here, although this one's going to be tough to thread the needle on, right? Tanner Engstrand of the Detroit Lions. This is not going to be easy to pull off. In fact, it might be pretty much impossible to pull off because everybody, and I do mean everybody, expects Tanner Engstrand to become the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions this offseason because Ben Johnson is going to leave to coach. A lot of people are saying the Raiders right now. And if Ben Johnson leaves, Tanner Engstrand is assumed to be the next man up. So if he is faced with a choice between being an offensive coordinator with play calling for the Detroit Lions or being an offensive coordinator with play calling for the Seattle Seahawks, I imagine he would stick it out in Detroit. He's been there the last 5 years. He's got familiarity with their players. And he's also got a really strong foundation to build on because that Lions offense has been so good for a while now. That being said, there are a couple things that can happen here. What if you offer him so much money, so much more money than what Detroit is willing to offer him, that he's forced to take your position pretty much? What if you make the Godfather offer? What if Ben Johnson decides or doesn't get the head coaching job anywhere? What if he comes back for another year as the offensive coordinator in Detroit? Tanner Engstrand might get tired of waiting. He might be like, I need an opportunity to call plays here. I'm starting to wonder if I'm ever going to get it in Detroit. So let's just go somewhere else, somewhere that'll give it to me right now. That's how you get Tanner Engstrand, one of those two scenarios. And the money stuff, that one's going to be interesting, right? Because Detroit could just go blow for blow with you on salary. Like, I'm sure they value this guy. So you might not be able to really outbid Detroit. Now, I will say this. The highest paid offensive coordinators in the league are still not making any more than like $3.5 to $4 million a year. So you could just go crazy and give him like $5 million or $6 million a year. But then you need him to be really, really good. And at the end of the day, we are talking about a guy who has no experience play calling and no experience as an NFL offensive coordinator. But those are the risks that you take sometimes. So let's go through the resume here, although it's not that long for Tanner. He's 42 years old right now. Last 2 years, this is where he's made his name. He is the Detroit Lions passing game coordinator. From 2023 to 2024, these are the 2 years where the Lions have been very good. They were a 15-win team this year, 12 the year before, made the NFC title game last year. This year, obviously, things fizzled out, myriad of different reasons why, but Engstrand's star is still on the rise. This year, Detroit had an elite passing attack. They were second in passing yards, third in dropback EPA, .267, pretty jaw-dropping numbers. 2023, they were second in passing yards again. And they were seventh in dropback EPA, .111. So really good results from the passing game ever since Engstrand took over. And he was also the passing game coordinator in 2022, which was the first year where Detroit started to really take steps forward. And he was also the tight ends coach. So in 2022, Detroit was eighth in the league in passing yards, almost 4,300. and they were third in dropback EPA, 0.174. So they were borderline elite as a passing team this year as well. So you can see why people like this guy so much. Now, Detroit wasn't utilizing their tight ends all that heavily in 2022. Hawkinson didn't play for them for a good chunk of the year. He had barely less than 400 yards, 26 catches. You also had Brock Wright with 4 touchdowns, 216 yards, 18 catches. Decent enough numbers, I guess. But as a tight end coach, there isn't a lot to say there, but the track record as a passing game coordinator is pretty phenomenal. And the year before that, 2021, now the Lions were bad. This was early in the era. This was immediately after the Stafford trade. Offensive quality control coach in 2021 for an offense that was near the bottom of the league in points and EPA. 25th in points, 19.1, negative 0.061 EPA, 24th. So obviously not great results then. He was also an offensive assistant in 2020. This was before the Stafford trade, and the Lions were a little below average offensively. Not bad, right? 23.6 points per game, 20th in the league. 0.014 EPA, 20th in the league. I mean, it's not terrible. It's okay. It's a little below average, but not quite bad. But again, he's an offensive assistant. It's not like he was calling plays for this unit. And that basically sums up everything that happened in Detroit on Engstrand's watch. So he's wore multiple hats over the last 5 years. And recently the results have been great. So you see why this guy's a hot commodity, and you see why Detroit is probably eager to make sure he doesn't leave by making sure he gets the OC job when Ben Johnson, it feels almost inevitable at this point that he leaves. So before Detroit, he actually spent a year as an offensive coordinator for the DC Defenders of the XFL. He was also the running back coach, so he had a lot of power in DC with the Defenders in 2020. Now, the DC Defenders did not have a good offense. They averaged about 16.5 points a game, which was 7th, but that was 8th in the league, right? There were 8 teams. There were 7 out of 8. Running backs that year were Jarrell Presley, who had almost 200 yards, and Donald Pumphrey, who had about 170. Remember that the XFL only had 5 or 6 games in 2020 before COVID shut it down. So, have fun trying to read something into this. It's not going to be easy. Before that, though, he spent 2018 as a Michigan Wolverines offensive analyst. This was during the Harbaugh era, so there is a little bit, I guess, of a crossover here where you've got him working under one of the Harbaugh brothers, and then you've got the other Harbaugh brother where Mike McDonald came from. So I don't know, maybe they've met each other before. Maybe McDonald and Engstrand have met. But offensive analyst in 2018 for the Wolverines. Wolverines offense was good this year, 35.2 points, 21st in the country. And before then, I'm not going to go into detail about this. He spent, 13 years wearing different hats for the San Diego Toreros. Sometimes he was the head coach, sometimes he was the offensive coordinator, sometimes he was the quarterback coach, sometimes he was the scout, sometimes he was this, sometimes he was that. He was all kinds of different stuff. I'm not going to list out all of them. And quite frankly, even if I did, it's not like I could tell you anything about it because the San Diego Toreros are the PCL team, a PCL team. I can't find any data on them anyway, so we couldn't learn anything anyway. So let it suffice to say that he spent a good amount of time with the Toreros and did good work and worked his way up in the ranks, but whether or not what he touched was successful, I'm not going to get into because I can't. The data is mostly not there. But what we're going to focus in on and what we do need to pay attention to is what he did in Detroit these last 3 years as the passing game coordinator. He's learning under Ben Johnson, who is one of the bright offensive minds in the NFL right now. He's learning under Dan Campbell, who is right now considered to be one of the best head coaches in football. And there's a lot to like. And were it not for the fact that he's never called plays before for an NFL team, this would be one of my top guys. I can't say he's one of my top guys right now because he is inexperienced in that field and you don't know if he's going to be able to do it. But this might be moot anyway. If Ben Johnson leaves, it's going to be very hard to get him out of Detroit. In Detroit, he's got an excellent receiver core, including Hawkinson, by the way, if you want to throw the tight end in there as well. He's got a viable quarterback. I know that Jared Goff is not an elite quarterback, but he can play. And that's locked up. The offensive line is pretty well locked up. That offensive line should be in place for quite some time. They've paid the key guys, and they've shown the ability to develop new guys if they need to. Guys like Mahogany, who could have gone one or the other, already looks like he's on his way to being a starter next year. And the running back room looks like it's going to be solid for the foreseeable future. So that is a great opportunity that Engstrand has in Detroit. In order to get it to pass him up, either Ben Johnson is going to have to come back for another year. That would probably get Engstrand out because he'd be impatient. Or you would need to offer way more money to him than Detroit does, which again would be kind of interesting because offensive coordinators, even the good ones in this league, don't make that much. What are you going to throw $10 million a year at him? You could, I guess, but what would Detroit even do at that point? You're going to give $10 million a year to an offensive coordinator that's never called plays before? I imagine that they would probably just kind of let you have it at that point, but now you're the team that is paying 3 times the going rate for an elite offensive coordinator for a guy who's never been an offensive coordinator in the NFL before. So it's a little bit tricky. It is. But that is the decision. That is the probable only way that you get a guy like Tanner Engstrand. So let me know what you guys think. It's a good resume. He's done really good things the last few years for Detroit, but I can't get that excited about a guy with no meaningful OC experience, and you would struggle to get him anyway. See you guys later. Go Hawks.